New year, and Nolan Arenado is still a member of the Cardinals. Will that still be the case when the Cardinals get to spring training? And if so, what will the impact be on their other offseason moves? What's going on, everyone, and welcome into this edition of B-Schaeff Daily. Brenden Schaeffer with you. It is January 2nd, 2025. A new year is upon us. I hope everybody had a safe and healthy and happy holiday season. But now it's back to the real world as we turn the calendar to January. And that means Cardinals winter warm-up in just a few weeks. That means spring training is just around the corner, about 6 weeks away or so, give or take. Really even a little bit less than that as we talk here on Thursday, January 2nd. In many ways, it has not been the offseason that I think we all expected to see from the Cardinals, where they haven't really traded away that big contract that everybody was speculating, assuming would be the case as of October or so when we first got the word from John Mozeliak that the Cardinals were looking to trim payroll this offseason. Nolan Arenado seemed to be the obvious candidate that the team would move. They thought that they were pretty close to doing it at one point, and that deal with the Houston Astros fell through when Arenado nixed it. And so now Cardinals still kind of feel like they're in this holding pattern. I would say that not the ideal way for their offseason to have gone based on what they set out to do at the beginning, but also there's still time remaining, and it'll be interesting to see exactly what unfolds between now and when the Cardinals have their pitchers and catchers report to spring training in Jupiter, Florida in early February. So today we're going to talk about sort of catching up on what's been the latest with the Arenado market. Is it apparently a possibility now that Arenado will remain with the Cardinals? And if that would happen, where could the Cardinals pivot potentially to accomplish their stated goal of trimming payroll this offseason? So we're getting into all that more today on B-Schaeff Daily. Appreciate you guys for following along on the YouTube channel. If you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button for Cardinals content all throughout 2025, the offseason, and into the season when we really get down to the nuts and bolts of Cardinals baseball. But before we begin, I would like to let everybody know that Smith Agri-Service and Revival LLC are presenting this episode of B-Schaeff Daily. Smith Agri-Service is a family-owned independent retailer providing farmers in Missouri, Illinois, and Iowa with competitive pricing on Corteva, BASF, generic brand crop protection products, and Brevant corn and soybean seed. Scan the QR code on the YouTube graphic or text 202-988-1106 or email smithag@irtc.net for more information. And Craft Revival LLC, I want to tell you about my friend Joshua, who specializes in passionately restoring log cabins to their former glory by studying traditional woodworking practices of the past and utilizing them in our modern world to create genuine, timeless beauty. The focus is preserving these cherished values in existing structures, whether it be your log cabin or your historic home, and elevating them to a higher standard. If you value craftsmanship, give Craft Revival LLC a call today at 573-366-6563. They specialize in log cabin repairs, maintenance, porch remodeling, historic millwork, and now offer new timber-framed construction, keeping craftsmanship alive one project at a time since 2021. Craft Revival LLC. Thank you again to those partners for presenting today's episode of B-Schaeff Daily. Let's get into the conversation now. Okay, so Arenado, as we know by now, Cardinals had a trade set up to send him to Houston. Houston was going to take on a lot of the remaining salary on Arenado's deal, which is a primary motivation for the Cardinals. And it seemed like the deal was basically done, just needed Arenado's approval based on everything that's been reported since. And he said, no, I do not approve this deal. Remember, that happened a little bit after the Astros had traded Kyle Tucker to the Cubs. So was maybe there a case where Arenado originally had thought, yeah, go ahead, Mo, you can talk to the Astros, work something out. That would be somewhere I'd be happy to play. And then did the Kyle Tucker thing change his mind? Or was it a case where Arenado felt like, well, this is still kind of pretty early in the offseason. I'm maybe hoping that somebody else asks me to the dance, right? I'm still hoping to hear from the Dodgers, or we might hear from the Padres, or another team, maybe the Red Sox or the Phillies. Who knows exactly what was the primary motivator for Arenado? But evidently Houston was not in that top tier of destinations that he was hoping to land with. Right, it was that list of 6 teams. I think it had been reported by John Denton, but then Joel Wolf back at the winter meetings said, oh, no, it's not a list as small as everybody maybe thought it would be. Arenado is, more willing to play some other places. He'll change positions to facilitate a deal. All of these things were being said. We have not seen a trade happen, and when the Cardinals were ready to trade him to Houston, Arenado said no. I know it's been reported, and Katie Wu with The Athletic has reported, and we'll talk about a little bit more recently, some of her reporting that points to the idea that Arenado might stay with St. Louis. Could be very interesting to see that happen after everything that has unfolded. But she reported that the Houston arrangement was viewed as the ideal situation for Mozeliak in St. Louis. The Cardinals would have been responsible for only about $5 million of Arenado's contract for the next 3 years. I don't know if that's each of the next 3 years, but regardless, Arenado was not sold on the idea. She adds, at least not at the time, and invoked his full no-trade clause to block the deal. What's really interesting about this is, and it was reported thereafter, I know The Athletic had it, that Arenado wasn't completely closed off from the idea of going to the Astros. He just didn't want to do it right now. I'm not going to say yes to a deal today. I think if Arenado was dead set on moving this offseason, that was a mistaken use of whatever he perceived his leverage to be at the time. Because the Cardinals now may not have, the music might stop and there's no dance partner willing to negotiate with the Cardinals for Arenado in a way that accomplishes what the Cardinals are looking to accomplish, which the Astros were evidently willing to do, which was, eat about $60 million of the remaining salary. If it's $74 million remaining and roughly $5 million of Arenado's contract for the next 3 years, again, if that was $5 million total, it means the Cardinals would have been off the hook for $69 million. If that was to mean $5 million per year over 3, then the Cardinals would have been off the hook for about $59 million, close to $60 million, which coincidentally is exactly what the Astros signed Christian Walker to for a 3-year contract. The money is almost identical to the pivot move that the Astros made when Arenado said thanks but no thanks, or I guess in essence, hey, I'm appreciative of your interest, but not right now. I'm trying to see what's still out there. Effectively is what happened by blocking that trade when, in the time that it was to take place. The Astros were saying, okay, well, we're going to move on with our offseason because this isn't how it works. We're not going to wait around. It's all well and good that you can say, well, I'm not trying to block it forever. I just don't want to do it right now. That's not, it just was never going to go down that way. That's why I say if Arenado's primary goal was to move and be on another team this offseason, then that was a mistaken use of the perception of leverage that he had. Because the Astros said, well, we're still doing our offseason. Like, we're not going to wait indefinitely to see if anybody else offers the Cardinals a deal that you like better so that you can go to that place instead of to us. And then Christian Walker's been signed and all of our backup options, Goldschmidt is signed since then. All those things have happened. Can't remember if Goldie was before or after this took place. But regardless, the market continues to move, and it wasn't going to wait for Arenado's decision. And I guess no other teams have come out of the woodwork to at least agree to a deal with the Cardinals, right? There might have been other teams interested in Arenado, but maybe they weren't willing to pay the $59 million or whatever the number was to take the Cardinals off the hook from that salary. The Cardinals want to be off the hook from the salary. That was the whole reason they were trying to trade Arenado in the first place. It's not your typical trade demand sort of deal, which is maybe why Arenado wouldn't be too heartbroken to remain with the Cardinals at the end of all of this, right? Where I said it before, if his primary motivation was to be traded, maybe that wasn't his primary motivation. Maybe it was, if I can have my cake and eat it too, if I can play for a winner and play in Southern California, or I can, closer to home, or I can play under circumstances that I would like even better than St. Louis, I can upgrade my situation with the Cardinals not being all in right now on trying to win, then, hey, maybe that's what I can do if that situation presents. If not, I'm not going to make what I would perceive in my personal world as Nolan Arenado to make a lateral move or a move that I don't consider to be a better situation than staying in St. Louis, which is somewhere presumably that he enjoys being. He wanted to come here in the first place, probably likes his teammates. All of these things can remain the same. It doesn't necessarily have to be that I'm traded right now. Maybe that has been his stance. And in looking at a lot of the way that it's been reported, I could see that. I could see that Arenado is not just desperate, dead set on getting out of here. Even though it's like, all right, the Cardinals probably aren't as positioned to win right now. They've still got good young players. They've still got guys that could emerge, and they were right on the cusp of it last year. And when you look at the production that they lost in the offseason so far, guys like Goldie, guys like Lance Lynn, guys like Kyle Gibson, who, Kyle Gibson hasn't been signed. Maybe Kyle Gibson comes back for a lesser amount if the Cardinals can find the budget. Maybe they haven't lost a ton from what last year's team did, and last year's team was on the cusp of making the playoffs. It fell short, of course, but you could envision a world where some of the younger players that they're going to commit to and rely upon a little more in 2025, maybe those guys improve what they did compared to last year, and suddenly the Cardinals are in the same spot or maybe even a little bit better positioned to make the playoffs than many people would have thought as of end of September, early October, when the Cardinals were talking about we're going to slash the payroll. So all of that still maybe remains on the table to where that's why Arenado rejected the Houston deal. He did it, to me, it went one of two ways. He did it knowing that it was likely going to realistically take the Houston deal off the table because Houston's going to move on, and they did so immediately. And for people who think, oh, well, maybe they would still, no. The Astros were, it's so identical. Adding Christian Walker for $60 million was going to pay $60 or so million for Arenado for the same length of time. You have Isaac Paredes who can play first or third. It just matched up. That was the response to Arenado saying, I'm declining, I'm rejecting, I'm nixing this trade right now. It can be reported later that, oh no, I maybe would be willing to kick the can down the road. But again, that's just not the way that it was realistically going to work. And maybe Arenado knew that from the jump, but just, his camp or however it was framed in the way that it was sourced was honest in that, I'm not just saying it would be never, but I would be open to it later. It's just right now I'm not. That was the decision that was made. Or he was maybe, a little bit naive to, again, that would have been direction number one. Yeah, this is probably not going to work out now, but I'm hoping to score a better situation that's going to come down the line. And by accepting the Astros trade, I know that I won't get the opportunity to have the mystery box, which could be a brand new team and exactly where I want to be. Or it could be staying with the Cardinals. The degree to which Arenado was of the mind that the mystery box could contain Jupiter, Florida, February 2025, he knows that. But I do think it's kind of interesting, but I think it also suggests that you'd have to be very naive to think that it would be impossible that nobody else would step up, or that the Cardinals would just say, yeah, this team wants to have you, and it's where you want to go, but they're not offering us any incentive to send you there, right? We want to do right by you. We'd like to get you somewhere where you want to be, but we also have goals that we're trying to accomplish, and they're not willing to eat the salary. Or, I think that's the number one motivator of the Cardinals. It's not who are the prospects the Cardinals could get. It's more about how much of this salary can you eat, because that's what we're looking to accomplish. And knowing that that's the primary motivator of the Cardinals in every way that this has been discussed over the past few weeks, that's where I pivot to, okay, what happens if the Cardinals are unable to find a suitable deal to themselves and to Arenado, and they just keep him? I think that is a possibility because, again, if Arenado was so dead set to leave the Cardinals, and it wasn't just kind of a mild preference of, I see the direction you guys are going, I see that you want to spend less money, I make a lot of money, I can connect those dots and understand that might be a goal of your organization this offseason to find somewhere else for me to be. I don't mind being here. I like being here. Yeah, sure, Busch Stadium's more of a pitcher's park, and that can be really annoying sometimes when the ball dies at the warning track. But I like St. Louis. I like the Cardinals. I like their fans. I like my teammates. My family likes it here. I'm happy here. But I understand the motivations of the organization. It takes two mature sides to probably have the conversation that was had if that's the way that everybody feels, right? For Arenado to say, hey, it's nothing personal, I understand, and also could see where this could benefit me if you get me somewhere that has a better chance to win as I get into my mid-30s, and Mozeliak in the Cardinals front office to be able to say, it's not that we don't like having you, we traded for you for a reason, but because of the constraints that we're kind of under right now from whether it's ownership or that's just the organizational direction that we're taking, this is what we're looking to do. It takes two mature sides, I think, to potentially be able to have that conversation, not have hard feelings, which is probably not realistic. Somewhere there's got to be some hard feelings, some disappointment that it hasn't worked out the way that everybody hoped when the arrangement first began. But then to potentially be able to say, yeah, we can put the toothpaste back in the tube on this. It was a business arrangement that didn't, we all made decisions. I made a decision. I didn't want to go to Houston because I thought maybe I could get somewhere better. Or maybe I thought, even if I don't get somewhere better, I'm okay with the possibility, remote though it may feel at the time, of if all of this falls through, I go back to the Cardinals. I just think it's very fascinating that this is where we are. But here's more from Katie Wu of The Athletic, where she writes, now both the Cardinals and Arenado are facing a plausible reality where the 10-time Gold Glove winner remains in St. Louis next season, as there has been minimal traction on Arenado's front since the Astros deal fell through. Red Sox and Yankees, reports, rumors, people talking about they've been kind of linked with Arenado. but it just remains clear where the interest is for either team. Maybe they're trying to accomplish other goals this offseason as well. The Yankees would obviously be interesting now with Goldie there. It would be a fit. And, that would be something that obviously would work out for the Cardinals. They're not interested, according to Katie's reporting, in taking on the majority of the contract, which is the whole reason the Cardinals are looking to do this in the first place, right? At first it was, we can start the rebuild, we can get some younger players. Like, they never really were saying anything publicly about the motivations, but in the way that it was speculated upon and reported upon, we kind of thought maybe it was a blend of the two. Get a little bit off the payroll or get a medium amount off the payroll. But you know what? Cardinals would probably eat some of that money to get a better prospect back, right? Like, who could they get? This is Nolan Arenado. It's kind of gone from that to, all right, this is clearly a salary dump if it happens. And because it feels that way, in the way that it's being framed, I would say that in theory, it would open up the Cardinals to have to then pivot to another trade. If there's a payroll mark that's their goal and they haven't reached that goal yet, I would not be able to rule out that they would make a trade of another player that makes some money between now and spring training to just kind of get the money off the payroll and get closer to that goal, or whatever that goal may be for payroll reduction, which again would probably not spell good things for a Kyle Gibson reunion if that's something he and the Cardinals would be interested in at a lower dollar amount. You're talking about really kind of working in the margins if they were planning to kind of trade away Arenado, get rid of some of that money, bring back Gibson on whatever 30% of what he made last year, 50% of what he made last year. Maybe there'd be some incentives. Who knows exactly what that arrangement would be? I'm saying all of this because I could envision a world where Gibson would want to be back because he wanted to be a Cardinal in the first place. He's got the connection to the area with his wife's family and all that. So it would be very simple, I think, to bring him back if you had the payroll room to do it. But now you're kind of looking around at what that rotation looks like. And we've talked about guys like Palante and McGreevy that I think can step forward and claim rotation spots this year with if in fact Lynn and Gibson are both gone. I think Lynn will be gone. Gibson, maybe they bring him back. But with the Arenado thing happening the way that it's happened, if he's still on the team, I kind of feel like it's going to be difficult for the Cardinals based on what they're looking to do payroll-wise to bring back Gibson or to spend money on a free agent pitcher of any kind. Now, maybe there's a world in which they can move some Matt's money, right? That's been talked about. And that wouldn't strike me as, a crazy pivot from something we could have seen at the beginning of the offseason. But it feels like everybody with all these players that have been rumored to, okay, there's some interest, or the Cardinals are floating X, Y, and Z, Steven Matz, like Fetty is another name, Helsley is another name. Those guys making a chunk of cash, but just on one-year contracts. Same thing with Matz. Michaelis is the same deal, but again, I can't envision Michaelis going anywhere other than the Marlins, just because of the Jupiter connection there with the spring training location. And, of course, you're in Miami. That's pretty close to Jupiter. I have no idea if or why the Marlins would have interest in Michaelis if they're looking to – I have no idea. But you'd be eating money there anyway. This is about reducing the Cardinals' payroll is the whole idea behind trading Arenado in the first place. Like I said, at first we maybe didn't appreciate the full gravity of that reality, that we kind of thought it could be split, 50-50, 60-40. Yeah, we want to trim some payroll, but we also want to, stockpile some talent for the future. I think it's about 98% about the payroll, 2%, maybe less, about what are we getting in return. If that's the case and you pivot, okay, Eric Fetty is a name that making $7.5 million, I think it would be almost inherently an admission that things have gone wrong if the Cardinals trade Fetty, because when they traded Tommy Edman to get him, I felt like that was more a move about 2025 than it was 2024. That was a move of Eric Fetty, while he does make $7.5 million, which is about what Tommy Edman was due to make, and then, of course, Tommy Edman signed the big extension with the Dodgers because they've got the infinite money tree. I thought, well, this is a move the Cardinals are making specifically because they want to have a lower payroll next year and have a locked-in starter like a Fetty that they can get cost-controlled because of $7.5 million. He's not a number one. He's probably not a number two, but he's like a solid number three, number four that you can get for $7.5 million. That you're going to beat the free agent market a lot of times with something like that, right? Maybe 7.5 or so was about what Kyle Gibson could earn in free agency, since he was about 10-11 last year and he's a year older, and it seems like the market is kind of quiet on him for now. But I feel like the Cardinals saw a world in which Eric Fetty had upside to potentially be more of a number two if he, pitches to the way that he pitched at the beginning of the year with the White Sox, than say a Kyle Gibson, who you kind of know he's more of a back-end arm, but reliable. You know what you're going to get from him. They like having him around. But like the idea of Fedde in the first place, I felt like was upside to have a solid arm for 2025, and it's cost controlled for that year. And you had other Tommy Edmonds running around like Donovan. And so it just felt as though that was a good value proposition for the Cardinals. I'm not saying that trade has worked out. I'm not saying it's going to work out. Who knows? We're going to have to see what becomes of Fedde here. It would just seem very strange to do it in July. Again, yeah, they were kind of in on 2024 at the time, but they didn't. You looked at the rotation at the end of July when they made that deal. The rotation wasn't screaming for Eric Fedde to come in right now and help. At least the way that we saw it. Now, in retrospect, we then found out, Lance Lynn's been pretty banged up with the knee, and they gave him a stint on the IL, and of course, he was still kind of dealing with that as the season came to a close. So maybe the Cardinals realized, like, we are actually going to need an additional arm, even though Palante's doing really well for us right now. If we want to make a real genuine go of this thing in 2024, we're going to have to add a solid starter that can be reliable. And so they added Fedde for that, but I also thought it was a pretty significant eye on 2025 when they did it. Maybe that's not the case. Maybe between July and now, the number as far as payroll expectations went down even further. Maybe they didn't get as good of a deal as they thought they would from FanDuel/Bally when they re-upped. Who knows exactly what has changed between now and then. Maybe they earnestly want to have Fedde as part of their team, but they might be looking at it now and saying, we thought we were going to be able to move the money that we needed to move by trading Arenado, and if that doesn't happen, well, 7.5 is still 7.5, and maybe Fedde, because of the way that the market has gone this offseason, with Devin Williams was traded for 1 year of Nestor Cortez, effectively, right? Devin Williams going from the Brewers, one of the best closers in baseball, to the Yankees, Cortez going to the Brewers, but that's like, it feels like the most valuable commodity in that deal was Devin Williams. Like the team that got Devin Williams for 1 year of Cortez, that's the higher profile name. So the Cardinals maybe could be looking at that and going, all right, this is not the worst offseason. Teams are in need of starters like an Eric Fedde. Maybe that's even why a Steven Matz gets a little bit of a sniff of teams poking around on. So we're willing to trade him, not because we are desperate to do it or we planned to do it when we got him in July, but more because the payroll target hasn't been met, and it's not going to be met by an Arenado deal because it doesn't seem that teams are willing to, other than Houston, who is no longer on the table because they immediately made their pivot move, it doesn't seem like that's something that's going to come to fruition now. So if we are very motivated by payroll, it's going to have to be a Fedde or it's going to have to be a Helsley. And in that world, which, again, I think at this point, based on the way that relievers are being valued, again, you can look at that Devin Williams trade two ways. Not Helsley, I'll get to him. Williams was traded for Cortez. It's like, all right, traded for a middle of the rotation arm who's on an expiring contract. That's the way that the starting pitching market is being valued this offseason by teams. The Yankees go, we got literally Devin Williams for one of those middle of the rotation arms. We feel like we got the difference-making player in this trade. So that would seem to mean that relievers not being valued as highly as those mid-level starters, which would put the Cardinals in a spot to maybe where they don't want to trade Helsley right now. The market doesn't dictate that you're going to get a lot for him in terms of, and for the Cardinals it's different because in neither case are they going to be looking for expiring assets. They're going to be looking for younger prospects, younger MLB talent, controllable talent. But just based on that Brewers-Yankees trade, you can surmise that the valuation of reliable starting pitching, solid starting pitching, which I would say Cortez and Fedde are both in that solid category, that's being valued more by the market than what you would imagine a high-end reliever would be valued as. So if there's a team that goes, yeah, we're not really looking to pay top dollar for the Helsleys, but we'll give you a contract for a Fedde because we could use a Fedde, then maybe the Cardinals make that move and see where they're at in July. If they're in contention, great. They've got one of the best closers in baseball. If they're not in contention, somebody by July is going to be going, I need a Ryan Helsley. And the Cardinals gambit is you're just hoping that he ends up still healthy at the time to be able to capitalize on what could be his max value, or you extend him because you really like Ryan Helsley. Like, there is a world in which they could do that. I'm just talking about it in the trade terms, not because I think, Ryan Helsley's no good. I'm just trying to live in the world where I believe the Cardinals are living this offseason, which is they're trying to not spend money and they're looking to the future to maybe not spend a lot of money right away. Maybe that changes as early as next offseason, but until we get that kind of pivot back and the winds are blowing back in a direction of revenues are great and the Cardinals are looking to add payroll again, I think it's going to be safe to assume for a little bit now that that's not really going to be where they operate. So Based on that, could Fetty be traded? Maybe. I put him in the category of making some money. I don't think when they would trade him, they would have to eat any of the money, and they could probably get a decent piece back for him, all relatively speaking. In the Helsley case, yeah, I think a team would be willing to pay whatever his salary is going to be this year, $9-10 million. I don't believe that's been finalized yet. But is it a case where they're going to get top premium in terms of the prospects they get back in return for Helsley? Probably not at this time. So as much as it felt like at the beginning of the offseason a no-brainer to capitalize on Helsley's value and trade him, if the market's telling you, no, we're not valuing that asset, that commodity right now, the way that you think we should, or objectively the way that it just like should be based on his talent level, then the Cardinals aren't going to just make a move to make a move. Again, they have goals that they're trying to do and accomplish with Helsley and with Arenado. And with Helsley, I think it should be a different goal than just get rid of some of the money that we'd owe him. It should be more about what can you get back. If it's something significant, then you pull the trigger. If not, wait and see what you can do. And there's risk associated with that, but it just seems like the path that they may be forced into or boxed into based on the way that the market is valuing relievers right now. Different for Arenado. They basically, I think, were willing to go, all right, we know he's had a couple of down years and still getting paid a lot. So as a result, if you take him, you can have him. And whatever we get is what we get back for it in terms of player talent. And we'll just kind of deal with that. We don't know what the return would have been from Houston in terms of player talent, but it the motivation of, hey, the money is going to be taken care of, that was where the Cardinals were. And that's why, I would say frustrating for them because their ideal version of the offseason isn't what came to fruition. But what if Arenado, who's been working hard in the offseason, is basically by default coming back to the Cardinals, and he has an Arenado type of season rather than whatever the last couple of years were, and because he's still only early to mid-30s, and you go, oh, the Cardinals are a lot better for this. He's the best player on the team again, and turns out Palante and McGreevy are able to hold it down as number 3, number 4 in the rotation, and heaven forbid, maybe Michaelis is back a little bit closer to league average instead of really struggling like he has. And you could paint that picture if you really wanted to of the Cardinals being more competitive next year. And then that doesn't even get into the Walkers and the Gormans and, all those guys that, maybe a healthy year from Nootbaar, all those things that could happen or they could not happen. And that's where the variance, I think, is going to come in for this Cardinals season. But that's kind of the way that I look at it. Maybe none of this comes to fruition. The Cardinals have a very quiet offseason. And, they just end up having to have a little bit higher payroll than they wanted to. They don't get to bring back Gibson like they were kind of hoping they would. And all of that sort of just sits where it is. And it feels a little bit stagnant, but it's just the way that the market is managing to negotiate with the Cardinals right now. Because, again, that's an Astros team that the Cardinals haven't made trades with. Like, that's not something that's happened recently. You think about all of the Eckstein 1, 2, 3 of it all. And they just haven't really. I know that there's like different executives there now, and a lot of the folks that were involved with the Cardinals had moved on, but Moselek's still here, right? And there were probably some hard feelings about the way a lot of those aspects went down. And so for the Cardinals to go out on the limb and say, yeah, we're going to work out a trade with Houston because we can accomplish our goal and they can accomplish theirs. For Arenado to go, yeah, I'll do it, but maybe I'll do it later. I don't want to do it right now. And the Astros are like, well, you're kind of wasting our time. We're going to go sign Christian Walker. Like, certainly not the way that the Cardinals would have, drawn it up at the beginning of the offseason, but it's where they are now. So let me know, Cardinals fans, what your thoughts on all of this are and what you're most excited about in the new year as it pertains to Cardinals baseball. Again, been very kind of stale recently, but we're going to try to get back into some content and hopefully some stuff happens because I've been racking my brain through the holidays going, I could jump on, do this, jump on, do that, and then it kind of got away from me. But let's try to have a New Year's resolution for more B-Schaeff Daily, more podcasting as we go. So thank you guys for sticking with me, for being, bouncing back and listening to this one after a layoff. Thank you to Smith Agri-Service and Craft Revival LLC. Check out the information for both of those fine companies in the description to this video if you'd like more information to support our partners. Thank you guys so much for your support, and we'll talk to you next time on B-Schaeff Daily. Peace.